In less than an hour, a carefully orchestrated campaign to build an untouchable international dynasty evaporated on the manicured lawns of the White House. What Queen Camilla just realized behind closed doors as she watched the most powerful political figures in the world physically pivot away from her is a cold and devastating truth. You can demand the deferential bows within the ancient walls of Buckingham Palace, and you can manage the daily diary of the king, but you cannot force the global diplomatic stage to legitimize a power grab that the true sovereign bloodline has already dismantled. This is the story of a silent, ruthless diplomatic execution. We are going to unpack the secret commercial alliances Camilla attempted to secure during a historic state visit to the United States, how Prince William and Princess Anne uncovered the maneuver, and the devastating, soundless retaliation that effectively erased her from the international stage. By the end of this analysis, you will understand the profound difference between the temporary illusion of absolute power and the staggering commercial desperation of a woman who has suddenly realized that without the institution's backing, her title holds zero geopolitical weight. To understand the sheer magnitude of this visual humiliation, we must first rebuild the formidable fortress of influence Camilla believed she had successfully constructed over the last 3 decades. For years, she navigated the treacherous waters of palace politics, evolving from the ultimate royal outcast to the anointed queen consort. She weathered the bitter fallout of the 1990s and slowly, meticulously clawed her way to the side of the king. This was not an accident. It was a masterclass in psychological public relations and relentless, calculated patience. She successfully managed the systematic erasure of Princess Diana's legacy from the daily operations of the firm, subtly reshaping public perception and securing the crown many thought she would never wear. Once she had the Archbishop of Canterbury's blessing and the spectacular crown upon her head, her confidence mutated into a dangerous sense of absolute entitlement. She felt she had King Charles completely controlled. In her mind, the transition from a highly controversial figure to the supreme matriarch of the firm was complete. She began to operate under the assumption that her title was a master key that could unlock any door, not just within the United Kingdom, but across the globe. She felt invincible, insulated by the heavy velvet ropes of an institution she believed she had finally conquered. She believed that the sprawling bureaucracy of the British government was simply too vast and too intimidated to challenge her international ambitions. This supreme confidence set the stage for her most audacious and ultimately fatal maneuver on foreign soil. The catalyst for her sudden downfall occurred during the highly sensitive planning stages for the King and Queen's historic state visit to the United States. A state visit is not a vacation. It is the highest form of diplomatic deployment, designed to project the enduring stability and geopolitical power of the British monarchy. However, beneath the exquisite couture and the historic tiaras lies a ticking clock of profound commercial desperation. Camilla knows a brutal financial truth. She possesses absolutely zero sovereign wealth. She does not control the sprawling, billion-dollar real estate and investment empire of the Duchy of Cornwall. That belongs exclusively to Prince William. She is effectively an institutional tenant, operating on a high-end lease that will terminate the exact moment King Charles passes away. Driven by this absolute panic, Camilla saw the American state visit not as a duty to the crown, but as the ultimate opportunity to secure permanent independent financial collateral for her bloodline. Operating through backdoor channels and leveraging her trusted private aides, Camilla quietly altered the deeply complex diplomatic agenda of the tour. She orchestrated a series of high-level private meetings with American billionaires, tech titans, and elite political donors intending to weave her non-royal children into lucrative international networks. Her goal was a staggering exploitation of her current status. She wanted to establish a global commercial footprint for her family, using the awe-inspiring machinery of a British state visit as her personal networking service. She envisioned a future where her children could seamlessly access the highest tiers of American wealth and influence, cloaked in the implicit authority of the crown. She assumed that because they were thousands of miles away from London, operating in a different time zone, the Foreign Office would simply accommodate her quiet administrative updates without asking questions. She assumed wrong. The modern monarchy, fiercely protected by the ironclad traditionalism of Princess Anne, and the forensic oversight of Prince William, operates with inescapable precision. William, who now commands the immense machinery of the sovereign wealth, understands that the crown's diplomatic power is sacred. It cannot be rented out, leveraged, or exploited for private commercial gain by non-working royals. During a routine top-level security and protocol review coordinated between the Prince of Wales's office and senior diplomats at the Foreign Office, a glaring anomaly was flagged. The hidden paper trail of itinerary revisions and private meeting requests exposed Camilla's discreet attempt to smuggle her private commercial ambitions onto the stage of international statecraft. To Prince William and Princess Anne, this was not merely a breach of diplomatic etiquette. It was a severe security threat and a direct, calculated insult to the integrity of the state. Furthermore, for William, this aggressive maneuvering in the United States was deeply personal. America was historically the ultimate stronghold of his late mother, Princess Diana. To watch Camilla attempt to exploit the very nation that so fiercely loved Diana for her own commercial gain triggered a cold forensic investigation. The intelligence quickly reached William's desk, and he immediately aligned himself with Princess Anne to crush this overreach permanently. They recognized that a simple verbal reprimand would not suffice. They needed to execute a cold, administrative retaliation that would dismantle Camilla's global illusion of power forever. The retaliation was executed with absolute precision, utilizing the weaponization of international protocol rather than public drama. William and Anne did not leak the story to the American press, nor did they engage in a screaming match across the Atlantic. Instead, they utilized the majestic, immovable machinery of the British Foreign Office to execute a masterstroke of revenge. Working in complete alignment with the highest levels of the government, William authorized a sudden absolute revision of the diplomatic itinerary. What looked like a routine administrative scheduling update was actually a total dismantling of Camilla's international strategy. Hours before the grand arrival at the White House, the access credentials and security clearances for Camilla's private team of aides and PR managers were quietly revoked. The high-level billionaire summits and private foundation meetings she had meticulously arranged were abruptly cancelled under the direct, unassailable authorization of the Crown. When Camilla stepped onto the global stage expecting to leverage her title into a lucrative international empire, she found herself entirely stripped of her executive schedule. The Foreign Office, acting on the revised protocols politely but firmly redirected the Queen Consort to superficial ceremonial duties. She was assigned to spouse programs, garden tours, and primary school visits, entirely blocked from the high-security rooms where real geopolitical power and wealth were being exchanged. The true devastation of this silent retaliation unfolded on the manicured lawns of the White House. As the international press gathered and the political elite formed their receiving lines, Camilla realized that her most trusted aides had been stopped at the outer security perimeters, their passes rendered useless by the supreme administrative authority of the heir to the throne. She was entirely isolated. As the cameras flashed and the diplomatic formalities began, the realization hit her with crushing, inescapable force. The administrative trick she thought would secure her family's dominance had instead handed William and Anne the exact justification they needed to sever her from the international framework. She was standing at the absolute pinnacle of global politics, yet she was suddenly suffocated by the staggering realization that she actually controls nothing. The trap had entirely snapped shut, leaving her completely exposed on foreign soil, facing an institutional blockade she could not break. The immediate aftermath of the White House lawn incident was not marked by a loud confrontation, but by a masterclass in visual isolation. As the military bands played the national anthems and the global press captured every micro-expression, Queen Camilla found herself completely untethered from the commercial empire she had spent months attempting to orchestrate. Surrounded by the imposing architecture of the American executive branch, she was entirely cut off from the executive power of her own nation. Without her private PR team to manage the optics and her billionaire liaisons completely scrubbed from the embassy itineraries, she was reduced to exactly what the institution required her to be: a silent, ceremonial spouse. The devastating contrast of this sudden reality was fully realized in that moment. To the American public and the television cameras, she appeared as a glittering monarch draped in historic jewels and waving politely. But to the inner circle of the British establishment and the diplomats observing the scene, she was a woman whose wings had just been ruthlessly clipped by the heir to the throne. When the cameras finally stopped flashing and the royal entourage retreated to the high-security confines of Blair House, the president's official guest residence, the psychological climax of the tour occurred. Camilla turned to King Charles, presenting him with the stark reality of her cancelled schedule and her barred aides. She demanded that he unleash his sovereign authority, pick up the secure diplomatic line to London, and order the Foreign Office to immediately reinstate her private commercial summits. For decades, Charles had defied his family and his nation to elevate her. She assumed he would instantly choose the peace of his marriage over the bureaucratic maneuvering of his son. But what she met was a silence that would permanently alter the trajectory of their remaining years in the palace. Charles did not make the call. He did not summon the British ambassador to override Prince William's directives. He simply looked away. Charles understands a fundamental truth that Camilla was desperately trying to outrun. A state visit is a constitutional mechanism, not a private vacation. To overrule his heir and the supreme authorities of the Foreign Office on a matter of international security, simply to facilitate the networking ambitions of his stepchildren, would be to ignite a constitutional crisis on foreign soil. Faced with the stark reality of choosing between the structural integrity of his government and the commercial ambitions of his wife, Charles chose the preservation of the British state. He knows that his own historical legacy rests entirely on a smooth transition to his son. His silence was the ultimate domestic betrayal, delivered not with angry words, but with a quiet, devastating refusal to intervene. This deafening silence entirely stripped away the grand illusion of her supreme authority, exposing the staggering commercial desperation that drove her to exploit the American tour in the first place. When you remove the deferential bows, the billion-dollar optics of a state visit, and the historic tiaras, you uncover a brutal financial reality. Camilla possesses zero sovereign wealth. The vast lucrative real estate empire of the Duchy of Cornwall, which generates tens of millions of pounds annually, belongs entirely to Prince William. The Duchy of Lancaster belongs strictly to the sovereign. Camilla holds absolutely no personal equity in the magnificent estates of the monarchy. She knows that when the current reign inevitably concludes, her structural influence drops to zero. She will become a dowager queen, entirely dependent on a financial allowance and a housing assignment dictated solely by King William V. Her frantic attempt to weave her non-royal children into the highest echelons of American wealth was a desperate scramble to secure permanent independent financial collateral before her protective shield vanished. She wanted to build an untouchable billionaire safety net in a game where she actually holds no real cards. Standing in stark, devastating contrast to this transatlantic commercial panic is the unyielding, quiet ascent of Princess Catherine. While the Queen Consort scrambles for backdoor alliances and geopolitical networking to secure a future for her family, the Princess of Wales has mastered the institution through absolute discipline and genuine public affection. Catherine does not need to alter diplomatic itineraries or manufacture access to international elites. Her power is legitimate, permanent, and deeply woven into the very fabric of the monarchy's survival as the mother of the future king. William's aggressive enforcement of the state visit protocols was fundamentally an act of protection for Catherine's future reign. He is ensuring that when his wife steps onto the global stage as queen, the international reputation of the British crown will be completely cleansed of opportunistic distractions and rival commercial factions operating in the shadows. He will not allow his family's legacy to be cheapened by the networking ambitions of his stepmother's lineage. Furthermore, William understands the profound historical weight of the American alliance. America was the landscape where his late mother, Princess Diana, achieved her greatest independent triumphs, captivating the nation without ever needing the palace machinery to validate her. To watch Camilla attempt to exploit the very nation that so fiercely loved his mother for her own commercial gain was a line that could not be crossed. He weaponized the rigid architecture of the Foreign Office not just to protect a schedule, but to protect a legacy. The forensic proof of this permanent shifting of power became explicitly visible in the days that followed. What looked like routine adjustments to the remaining American tour were actually the final nails in the coffin of Camilla's international strategy. Protocol officers taking direct written cues from the Prince of Wales's office suddenly became uncompromising. The remaining embassy dinners and cultural receptions were strictly audited. Camilla was subtly repositioned in official photographs, moving from the center of diplomatic gravity toward the margins safely contained within the ceremonial boundaries prescribed by the state. That detail matters. It is where the story permanently changes, because it proves that the ghost of Princess Diana, which Camilla spent 30 years trying to erase, has not just survived. It has been inherited, protected, and quietly weaponized by a son who refuses to let the core identity and the geopolitical integrity of the Windsor family be diluted. Queen Camilla may have successfully navigated 3 decades of palace politics to secure her marriage. Her title and her crown, she achieved exactly what she set out to do. But the crushing tragedy of her victory is the realization that the crown is empty. The absolute power she coveted was a mirage, slipping through her fingers the moment the true heir decided to lock the doors. The future of the British monarchy and its standing on the global stage is firmly undeniably in the hands of the Prince and Princess of Wales, and all Camilla can do now is stand quietly in her borrowed jewels, forced to play her part on a stage she no longer directs. Thank you for joining us as we unpack the hidden dynamics of the royal institution. If you appreciate this level of forensic analysis and want to understand the real power plays happening behind closed doors, hit the subscribe button and join our community. We will see you in the next breakdown.